Okay. I guess I'm live. Just want to check something here. Waiting. Live. Okay, I'm trying to get organized here. And I'm going to have my iPad on where I will see the, here we are. Okay. In order, because just a little background here. I gotta put this on mute. And I'm going to have my iPad on. Where did I do that? No, mute. Okay. We're just about ready to go. What I'm going to do is, so that I can see the questions as they show up, I am going to have the video up on iPad. And wow, yes, will you upload? Boy, there's so many questions. I'm not sure this is a good idea. Anyway, I'm going to start now. Or no, I got to, oh, here we are. Okay. Today, I want to talk, first of all, the first half of my week is Arabic. So I'm in the Arabic part of my week. So I'm going to talk a bit about Arabic. I'm going to talk a bit about tutors and getting more out of our tutors, and a little bit about how to customize your whole language learning experience, which I think is very important. Traditionally, we go to a classroom, we're passive. The teacher comes in with whatever they're going to teach, the curriculum, the plan for the day, the teacher's in charge, and we are basically the, not the victim, but we are the target, so to speak. And I think in the modern world where there are so many resources and so much good content, so many grammar resources, where it's so attractive and possible to learn languages, we have to be more proactive. And that's therefore true in how we interact with our tutor. And it's true generally in how we approach our language learning. And so that's what I'm going to talk about here today, but with an emphasis on the role of the tutor and how important the tutor is. By the way, for this Zoran who's helping me, he's in Serbia, with the questions, and the idea was that I would have the video on my iPad and see all the questions, but there's such a stream of comments that that's not going to work. So I'm going to leave it to Zoran to pick out of this stream of comments those questions that he thinks are particularly interesting and feed them to me via Slack, because this other approach is not going to work. Okay, but you know, all of this stuff we're exploring, we're learning, so this is not a practical solution. All right, so I want to first of all talk about customizing our language learning experience with specific reference to how we interact with tutors. And with that, I am going to share my screen with you. So screen share here, and screen share, and it's desktop 2, and start screen share. All right. So hopefully now everyone can see my screen, I hope. Yep. So, and I'm going to turn this off because this is delayed. Let's see. I hope everyone can see the screen. Hello? No? If I look at the, oh, here we are. Okay. So I'm going to turn this thing off because it's just too confusing to be seeing something else that's on delay or whatever. So there we go. In just a second. Okay. And so hopefully Zoran will push questions to me on the 90-day challenge thread at Slack. All right. So I'm at my, where I like to be for language learning, which is obviously LingQ. And we are going to talk about tutors, but before we get to tutors and how we best interact with tutors, I want to point out how important it is to be aware that we can customize what we're doing. First of all, let us go. And so I'm going to point out some things about LingQ that some of you may be aware of and others may not be aware of. So first of all, to get a sense of what we've been doing, we go to the profile page. And so if I look at my Arabic, I can see my activities for the last 7 days. And you'll see that typically I was active, then I'm not active, and then I'm active, because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going part of the week in Arabic, part of the week in Farsi. So if I showed my Farsi or Persian profile, it would be the mirror opposite of my Arabic profile. But I can also look at when I first started with Arabic. And so I will see that if I look at, say, known words, accumulating known words, which is, to me, a very important milestone. Like, I am driven, if we talk about customizing our language learning experience, I am driven by the desire to increase my known words total. Because I know from experience that when I have enough words, 10,000, 15,000 words, I'm able to understand content that's interesting. I'm able to understand it when I hear it and when I read it. And when I get to that stage, then I can really, develop in the language while, listening to and reading content that's interesting to me. So I'm learning things while improving my language. And I know that at my present level of 7,200 words in Arabic, I'm far from being there. Although this morning I was doing an article from Al Jazeera and I saw myself understanding much more than I did before. I see also that my activity when it comes to known words has been sporadic. Certainly from August to October, I didn't do too much. The summer, I had family visiting with us in Vancouver from London, whatever. Then I picked it up just prior to my visit to Morocco, and then it's fallen off a bit. That would be the situation with known words. If I look at listening, again, it follows a similar pattern. I was very active earlier on, have been less active recently, yet it is all cumulative. And it's important to remember that everything that we do, even if we slacken off at certain times, we are always accumulating experience, and therefore we are accumulating ability, so to speak, in the language. So what I'm going to do, by the way, next time is I'm going to show you my history on all the different languages that I have learned, Russian, Czech, Korean, and so forth. And you'll see how this activity can be sporadic, but it is all cumulative. You don't lose anything. Now, if I go back to, say, the lessons area, and I just want to point out that you can customize a number of things. First of all, you don't have to land. I used to land on my library all the time, and but really I wanted to land on the last lesson that I was studying, my lessons. So if you go into the settings, you can set, first of all, interface language and a number of other things. If you want to see the lesson feed or don't want to see it, you can also customize the reader setting. So, for example, I turned off the automatic text-to-speech. Oh, home settings, by the way, where was it? I can't remember where I found that. Review settings, reader settings. I don't know where I found page size, home settings. Where was review settings? No, home settings, interface language. Default tab. Here it is. Default tab. If you don't want to land on the library every time, you can choose where you can land. You can land on the playlist. You can land on the vocabulary. So I found it better to land on my lessons. So I changed my settings. So I just want to point out that every little thing that you do to customize your learning, to make it work for you, is going to be powerful. Now, similarly, when it comes to how you interact with your tutor. So I have typically not used online tutors that much. As you know, I'm very much pro input-based learning. However, with the recent languages, Arabic and Farsi in particular, I have tended to work more with online tutors. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. First of all, you want to choose a tutor that has, that works for you. So if we go to the tutor page, I did a number of lessons with Ibrahim Mustafa from Egypt. I highly recommend him. He's an excellent tutor. However, the timing doesn't work. His timing that works for him is in the afternoon. Well, I can force myself to be there in the afternoon, but in fact, when my wife and I are here in Palm Springs, we're doing other things in the afternoon. So I like to study in the morning and the evening. So I need tutors who are available when it's most convenient for me. So I'm not forcing myself to, to do something that I know I can't maintain. So for that reason, I moved away from, I have had lessons with JQH, a delightful tutor from, originally from Palestine, from Bethlehem, but who lives in Kuwait and holidays in Spain. But recently I've tried to connect with her and I didn't get any confirmation back. So now I have been working with Dahlia, who I am going to be talking to at 11, and she is excellent. And because another thing that I think is very important, obviously a high quality connection is important. She's very encouraging. And we've started, I will insist from now on that any tutor I work with has to give me a decent report with lots of words and phrases that I struggled with and a recording. This really makes the whole session, that much more valuable, because I can review them again and again, and I'll show you how I do that. And I can listen to them again and again. And of course, when we're with the tutor, and even the decision on how much time do you spend with, online tutors, as opposed to how much time do you spend forging ahead in the language, reading, listening. I mean, this is again where you have to customize it. I've often said that, in language learning, it's novelty and repetition. And so the repetition sort of consolidates what you have learned, and the novelty is the brain wants something new, fresh, interesting. So you kind of combine the two. When I'm having a discussion with my tutor, we are largely consolidating things that I have already learned, because I have to be able to use words that I have. New words crop up, so there's that degree of novelty, but it's mainly a matter of consolidation. And on Wednesday, when I show you my statistics in different languages, you'll see that in some languages you can sail ahead, saving new words. I mean, if you know Spanish and you're learning Italian, you can acquire the new words very, very quickly. Not necessarily well enough to use them, but certainly well enough to recognize them. So less consolidation is needed. But in the case of Arabic and Persian, I need a lot of consolidation, because it's just so difficult to remember the words. I have no real, I need to get a better sense of how the language functions. And so therefore, I end up spending more time with tutors. But one other thing that I'm doing in Arabic, which I did a little bit in Farsi, is reading with the tutor. Reading with a tutor helps me, and I'll give you a demonstration. For example, in this lesson here, Azizi Abu Sara, Awal Filastini, Yatarashuh, candidate, but Yatarashuh. See, she would help me with that pronunciation. Le Raisa Baladia Al-Quds. Okay, the first Palestinian candidate for mayor of Jerusalem. You'll see in there, he uses a lot of Levantine Arabic mixed in with his standard Arabic. So in reading this together with Dahlia, words that had been, I couldn't find them in the dictionary, I didn't understand what was going on, she was able to explain that. So reading with her may enable me to read better. The disadvantage is that if we spend the hour reading, then I don't get a lot of new words in the report. So, this is where you have to, I was going to show you some examples. Let's see here. Just a second. No, this is not working here. There we go. I'm trying to drag it down, but I guess I can't. Okay, so where does Azizi speak here? Aziz, okay, let's go back one more. Let's see. Azizi Abbas. Okay, so Innu fi Sababain, but there was an area where he uses ruh, which means sofa. Sofa, will is ruh, and he's got this but like he has a number of nachnu becomes akna. So here we are, ruh yiltam. So he uses a lot of words that come out of Levantine Arabic, apparently. So that was helpful to me. So I have options now in dealing with my tutor. I can say we want to read. That's going to help my reading. So I'm investing in improving my ability to read in the language so that when I'm reading on my own, I do better. However, the downside is that I will get fewer words in my report because the report consists of words and phrases that I struggle to use. So, but I do want to invest some in that. At other times, I want to invest more in a free-flowing conversation on subjects of interest to me, so that'll generate some suggestions of vocabulary that then I can study. This is helping me create, relevant input, because I'm still very much a believer that input is what teaches you the language, but you want to either find or generate relevant input. And so even my interaction with my tutor is largely an input-oriented activity. One other thing that's very important in interacting with the tutor is that if we're learning on our own, obviously motivation is tremendously important. And the tutor has a vital role in motivating the learner. And so, for example, when I think of the fact that I'm going to be talking to Dahlia, of course, I'm very motivated. I want to show her that I've improved, that I learned something from the last time. Of course, very often I don't improve and I make the same mistakes. And when I review my, let's go and have a look at that. When I review my, I can look at my lessons here, lessons or courses. So let's go to courses, go a little faster, conversation reports. And I can go in and see all of my conversation reports going back to August. And when I do that, I see that I make the same mistakes over and over again. That's perfectly normal. But still, we are motivated to improve, to show our tutor that we are doing better. So to that extent, the tutor is also an important motivator. Some of us require more external motivation, some require less. So that's another sort of element that goes into, customizing your learning activity, customizing your interaction with the tutor. Also, if the tutor is reluctant to provide a recording of the report or gives you a very short report, I have no trouble asking the tutor, because the tutor, you're only paying for an hour, and very often the tutor has another hour scheduled. And so I'd say, look, I'll end the conversation 10 minutes early, but please, I want you to give me a decent report and to record it, send me an MP3 file. Of course, the report that we get, it's very easy at LingQ, because if you open any of these, let's go to the most recent one here from Dahlia. If we open the report, oh, this is already in. I wanted to show you how we receive it, but it comes, as you see, with audio recording. But if I look at the tutor section, and if I look at my activities, and I will see, say, conversation report from Rana in view report. So it comes this way with the audio attached, and I just import it, and then I have a lesson to study. So that's kind of convenient when it comes to interacting with your tutor. So I don't want to cover too much material, or everyone will get confused. I just wanted to cover some of the things that I do on LingQ and some of the ways that I customize my learning. But I would be interested in anybody's comments And maybe I will go back to the video, and because I'm not getting any questions from Zoran. And let me just see here. Now I have to try and find it. Let's see. No. Okay. But as I say, if you have questions, let me know, and I will try to pop up that YouTube video and see if I can pick out some questions from the list here. Okay. Okay, let's go to the very top. What language did you enjoy learning the most? I enjoy learning all my languages. It's amazing. I'm very much enjoying Arabic and Persian. I enjoyed Greek. I enjoyed Korean. I enjoyed all of the languages. Learn Finnish. Sorry, you can't see any video. How did you get a higher node word count on LingQ? Do you review your words often or just consume more content? The word count. All right, this is a very important point. Most of the words that I acquire on LingQ, I acquire incidentally. In other words, after a while, if I see, particularly in languages where there are 2 or 3 or 4 forms of a particular word, or words often have, you know, similar components but mean slightly different things, and we don't feel we need to look them up. But some I do deliberately move to known. In other words, they have shown up as yellow links so often that now when I look at them, you know, I know them now. I've moved it from status 4 to status 3 to status 2, and now I know them. So you know, and a small number get there. Get there because I've gone through reviewing them. I do review, but that would not account for. I'm going to stop the screen sharing. That would not account for the words that I have learned. A very small part of it. So again, you know, the trick in order to increase your word count is to do a lot of reading new stuff, rereading old stuff. Obviously, words that you have encountered in your reading and have converted from blue to yellow, those yellow words show up again and again and again. And I find it very helpful to know that this is a word that I've seen before. So it's not completely new to me, even though I don't know what it means. And then I might even have refined the meaning because there might be several possible hints. I've selected one that I think is relevant. So the second time I look it up, I have a more relevant hint there. And that's the process. Higher known word count is simply a matter of being active. In fact, I think what's important with our statistics at LingQ is that they measure your level of activity. And if you are active, if you are reading and listening and encountering words in different contexts and reviewing them and doing all these things, you will improve. So the best measure, in a way, the most meaningful milestones are all of these statistics, because trying to evaluate how much you have improved based on some subjective criteria is much more difficult. Okay, how are you managing to learn more than 4 at once? Okay, I don't learn 4 at once. At the present time, I'm learning 2, Arabic and Persian. But prior to that, I worked on Greek because we went to Crete. So, and the other thing that I think is important, and when you saw those statistics of where I've been very active, say in Arabic, and less active, or more active in Persian, less active, whatever I feel that I put into a language in terms of my activity is never lost, all right? It sits there and it can be reactivated. But right now I'm dealing with 2. Do you prefer to read paper books or online books? Okay, if I know the words, I prefer to read paper books. However, if there are even more than a few percent, like on a given page, if there are 3 or 4 words that I don't know, then I prefer to read at LingQ, actually, because I can look them up, because they go from blue to yellow. I mean, looking a word up doesn't mean you've learned it. Very often you've forgotten the meaning soon after you've looked it up. So it's not just a matter of looking it up, it's a matter of getting it into the stream of words that will eventually become words that I can at least understand and eventually use. I'm going to let that ring. So, you know, there comes a point where I can read, and I will sometimes read paper books and just ignore the words that I don't know, because it is more comfortable to read a paper book. So in Czech or in Polish, I would read on paper and just let the words that I don't know go by me. How do you manage your time between them? Do you not feel like you're progressing slowly? We always feel that we're progressing slowly in a language. Oh, that question was not directed to me. It was directed to someone else. Okay. You know, I have questions here in Arabic, but I'm just not good enough on the fly to read them. Okay. Where are my Spanish learners at? I'm at university and I have 4 languages on my degree. Okay, so that's where that came from. All right. You're learning Khmer, so people are talking to each other. Greetings from blah, 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 blah. So people talking to each other, that's good. That's good. I'm just trying to make sure that there aren't any questions to me. That Steve, have you ever chatted with a tutor in only target language? It's quite easily done if the tutor has a system. It's great for forging the sometimes. I only talk to my tutor in the target language. I discourage the tutor from using English. Occasionally, English comes up, but mostly, like Ibrahim Mustafa didn't speak English. Well, no, he spoke English, but we didn't speak English. And the good tutors in Farsi or in Persian, they just explain it over and over again in the target language. That's why I don't like to get started with a tutor until I at least have some vocabulary and some comprehension ability. So yeah, I don't start from scratch with a tutor. I think that's a rather poor use of the tutor's time and of your money. What dialect of Arabic? I am learning Standard Arabic. We do have some Levantine Arabic and Egyptian Arabic content on LingQ. At times I sort of am tempted to try to get in there, but then I realized that I've still got a long way to go to get my Standard Arabic. I want to get the Standard Arabic because there's so much content out there on you know, radio, podcasts, newspaper articles. And I'm convinced that if at any point I wanted to focus in on Levantine or Egyptian Arabic, that the better my Fusha or Standard Arabic, the easier I will find it to get into these more specific versions of Arabic. Okay, now I download the app link, but it's very expensive for me. It's too bad. We also have expenses. We have programmers and other personnel. When I use the built-in stories on LingQ, it highlights sections of text, but when I import a story, it will only do single words. Okay, this is a specific technical issue. I don't know the answer, Luke Connor. If you would, I will try to follow up, but perhaps you could say, if you could comment on our forum. Other people may or may not be experiencing this. That would be very helpful for us. Okay, can you give me LingQ? I don't understand that. Can you give me LingQ? I had my first conversation after about 2 weeks and it did very well. Good. How do you focus when you're listening to mini stories? I find it often gets repetitive and boring and I end up reading instead. Sure. I mean, I am very motivated to, first of all, you can't just do the mini stories, but at an early stage in the language, that's kind of all I'm able to do. And I am very motivated to get a sense of the structures, the phrasing, and the mini stories are focused on the most common verbs. And I believe that if you can do very well with the verbs, the tenses, and how they're used, and give, take, think, need, want, that really helps you get, you know, a leg up on the language. So I can take it, but I can see where some people would find it boring. That's why you need to get at other material as well. And it also depends on your level. Bonsoir, Monsieur Steve. Je vous informe que je suis en train d'apprendre l'italien, mais j'ai du mal à progresser. Je me bloque quand je veux parler et j'ai du mal à comprendre les gens à l'oral. Bon, so he's making progress in his Italian, but he's kind of blocked when he goes to speak. Okay, you have to, the only way you can de-block yourself is to speak more. But I find that if I do a lot of listening and reading, and in this regard, I find the mini stories very helpful because they give you momentum. They give you sort of basic phrases around the most important verbs. So you have these phrases bouncing around in your brain, and then when you go to speak, you just throw them out there. Don't worry about getting things right or wrong, or just let it go out, get out, and you'll hear the way the other person speaks. And as through this process, you'll gradually get unblocked. But it's difficult. I'm not pretending that you can just get out there and start speaking right away. Like on Friday, okay. Indonesian, they're talking to each other. When starting, is it better to repeat the lesson at length or move through a lot of lessons and repeat later on? I repeat later on. So again, nowadays I start with many stories. I did it in Arabic and in Persian and stuff, Greek. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to 1. So I might listen to the 1, 2, 3, 4 times, read it 2, 3, 4 times, still not really get it. Certainly don't remember the words. I'm tired of the story. I go to story 2. I do the same. I work my way up to story 5, and then I go back to story 1 again, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then at some point I add 6, and I go back, and 7, and pretty soon I'm up to 10, 15, 20. And therefore, if I look at my playlist, I'll see that I listened to story 1 50 times, story 2 45 times, and by the time I'm at story 15, I only listen to that 15 times. So here we have, je viens d'acheter la méthode assimile pour l'anglais d'Amérique. Je ne voudrais pas que ce qui m'est arrivé en italien m'arrive en anglais. Qu'est-ce que vous me suggérez? Well, he also bought assimile for English. Assimile. I hadn't done assimile for English. I have done assimile for Russian, good content. Korean, not so good. Arabic, Persian. There's, it's not enough. It's a bit. It's not going to teach you the language. Voilà. Assimile, c'est un système avec des petites histoires, des leçons, mais ce n'est pas assez parce qu'il nous faut beaucoup de contenu pour que nos cerveaux s'habituent à la langue. Donc, assimile, c'est très bien, mais il faut écouter beaucoup de choses, des choses différentes. Il faut beaucoup lire. Éventuellement, il faut parler sans se soucier des erreurs qu'on commet. Hein. Et puis, je vous suggère d'utiliser LingQ. Okay, here. Did you forget words that you have marked as learned? Yes, of course. And then you link them again. Okay, so a number of people get bored with mini stories. Mini stories are starter material and also a place where you go back to occasionally to exercise, to practice in the basic structures of the language. I find now, say in Arabic or Persian, I can go back to the mini stories, do 2 or 3, and then I'm out of there again because it's too boring. But when I got started, I would totally overdose on the mini stories. Yes, I forget words that I've learned and link them again. Yes, always. What motivated you to learn Arabic? Okay. Arabic. I like to learn languages that are spoken by a lot of people, that have a lot of history. It's part of my sort of discovering the world. Initially, so my wife and I went to Crete, and we went to Israel. We went to Jordan, to Aqaba. So I learned Greek because I was going to be on the island of Crete and I was able to use it. And it's fun that I can now read Greek. And of course, my Greek is kind of ability to speak has declined somewhat, but it's there and I can go back to it. I tried to learn Hebrew, but I wasn't there very long. And then I said to myself, look, there's 10 million people who speak Hebrew. There's 300-400 million people who speak Arabic. So I was motivated to learn Arabic. And now that I'm into Arabic and Persian, and I'm going to do Turkish, and you realize the extent to which these 3 languages have interacted and the civilization, the culture built around that part of the world, it's all fascinating. It's all a part of discovering the world. So yeah, that's why I'm interested in Arabic. Okay, that's interesting. Alik Shaf tells me that Iraqi dialect is closer to standard Arabic than other dialects. That's fine. I will, get there one day. I have a big problem with listening skills. What can I do to find a solution for my problem? Listening is key. Listening is the core ability. What you do is you have to listen a lot. Whatever you listen to, you should try to read. so that you have a better chance of understanding the second time you listen, and then read again and listen the third time. And you just gradually, you have to consider your brain as something that has to be trained in the listening. And if you're just listening to noise and you just don't understand anything, I think it's going to take a long time to get there. So make sure you have a transcript for what you're listening to and do a lot of listening. Listen everywhere you can. I've said it many, many times. I listen when I do house chores. I listen when I exercise. I listen in the car. And then I spend some time reading what I listen to so that I have a chance of understanding more of it the next time. Okay, I want to improve my Italian, but no one to speak with. Well, do a lot of listening. Italian, I mean, there's so much wonderful content out there to listen to, and then hopefully you'll find an opportunity to use it. Now, Linus 360 is 1 hour a day enough to learn language. 1 hour a day is better than 15 minutes a day. So I think 1 hour a day is a good number. I did that for a long time with Russian. Right now, I'm probably doing 2 hours a day in the morning and in the evening. But it's better than nothing. Okay, I am Brazilian. Why is it so hard for me to learn English? I'm assuming actually that you speak English quite well. Another thing is people shouldn't be so hard on themselves. They say, oh, my English is no good. But your English is undoubtedly better than it was 6 months ago, a year ago, or before you ever learned any English. So we have to kind of recognize that we are progressing, even though very difficult sometimes to get a real feel that we're progressing. I prefer reading over listening, so my listening is lagging behind. Okay, that's a choice. I talked about customizing our learning experience. At some point, you know, try listening at times when you can't read. You can't read while driving the car, or, you know, there are times when it's not convenient to read, but you can listen. Do you have a set routine every day or just listen to read whenever? Oh, sorry, I missed one. My question is it advisable to use the communicative method with Romance languages and Asian languages? I don't know what the communicative method is. I think the learning system is not so much dependent on whether it's Romance languages or Asian languages. You know, if we're English speakers, we'll progress more quickly in Romance languages because there's a lot of common vocabulary. In Asian languages or in Arabic, it's going to take a little bit longer. You might spend more time, you know, for example, in mini stories and the sort of simple repetitive stuff to get a better hold of the language. Whereas if we're going into Spanish, we can progress very quickly into authentic content. I don't know what the communicative method is. My method is lots of listening and reading as a sort of foundation from which to start speaking. Do you have a set routine? Well, I try to, you know, early in the morning and sometimes after breakfast and in the evening after dinner. Those are my study times in terms of like working with LingQ on iPad, reading and reviewing words and stuff. The listening takes place during the day. If I'm on my bicycle, if I'm working around the house, if, you know, whatever, I manage to scrape together 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, at least an hour of listening, plus the more deliberate study time. Do you have a set routine? Can you share a good podcast website in Russian with text to use at LingQ? All right. A lot of people in Russia don't like Echo Moskvy. It's a radio station, Echo of Moscow. You can look it up. But it has a tremendous advantage in that it has every day, it has interviews where you can download the audio and you can also download the text. So you can import all of that into LingQ. In fact, we obtained permission from Echo Moskvy to use their material at LingQ, and we have uploaded quite a bit of their material at LingQ. You have to be a little careful at Echo Moskvy. I think the person who runs it, Venediktov, he kind of sees this as a platform for everything and anything. So you have a lot of people who are critical of the government of Mr. Putin. You have the extreme nationalists. You got the imperialists, the communists. You got everything on there. And there is a tendency for people to say things that aren't necessarily verifiable. So you don't have to worry too much about the content per se, in terms of whether it's true or you believe it or you don't believe it. But as a source of audio with text material, very lively, Echo Moskvy is phenomenal, in my opinion. Now, Mike, is it advisable? Okay. Yeah, вы говорите по-русски, yes. What would be your approach to learning a language you are not passionate about and you have to learn it, for example, for work? Okay, that's a good question. My advice there's an expression in French, l'appétit vient en mangeant. So the appetite comes with the eating. So you have to force yourself. If you have to learn a language for work, you have to begin by forcing yourself. Develop some habits. Look for things of interest. Is it music? Is it art? Is it history? Find something. Find a person you like. Find something about it. You don't have to like the whole language, the whole culture, every representative of that culture. You have to find something that you can like. And so I would make an effort to do that. Okay, 안녕하세요. I got there. Hi, Steve. Do you still record yourself speaking and listen back to it? You mentioned doing it in your book in your early days of language learning. Yeah, I don't do that now. I did do it for French and for Mandarin. It's just something I've stopped doing. Again, I talk about customizing your language learning experience. If you like doing that, I think it can be helpful. I don't worry so much about my pronunciation. Now, do that if you enjoy doing it. I don't think it's necessary. And don't do it often. It would be my advice as well. There are a number of things that sound like a good idea. We do them once or twice, and then we don't find them either useful or fun, and so we stop doing them. Would you look at my link stats and advise? You know, it's difficult for me to do. You know what? I will talk about link stats on Wednesday in different languages, and maybe we can look at different people's link stats somehow and talk about them. How many hours approximately should one study per day if they want to achieve C1 in Chinese within 3 years? Difficult to say. I mean, as many hours as you can devote to it. But I think if you're looking at 3 years, you know, when I learned Chinese basically in a year, and I was going out at 6-7 hours a day. So I think if you did 2 or 3 hours a day, you should be able to achieve C1 in 3 years. Thank you for your answer. Steve, I'd love to get advice on my link stats. I see that. We'll do that. We'll deal with that on Wednesday. Возможно ли мне сейчас учить два языка одновременно? Пример, английский и французский. Не учили иностранный язык. You know, here's Ava asking, you know, if it's possible to learn 2 languages at the same time for someone who has not studied foreign languages. I didn't do it at that stage. I am now doing 2 languages at the same time. I think the more languages we learn, the better we get. So my advice probably would be to focus on one. Это сложно сказать, Eva Win, но сейчас я изучаю 2 языки. Pardon, my Russian is going to be very rusty. 2 языки, да. Но когда у меня не было такого опыта с изучением языков, я сосредоточилась на одном языке. И это может быть лучше для вас. Okay, hi Steve. Since I've made some progress with my English, I decided to switch to learning French. Should I consider learning French through English, or is it better stick to my L1? It depends on how good your English is, but to judge from what you've written here, your English is extremely good. And I think I would do it through the English. But to some extent, if you find useful content, explanations of grammar or whatever that's based in Russian, I would use both. Like I have used French and English to learn. Like right now, for my Arabic, I bought a number of resources in French. So I really don't think it matters, but I have the impression just looking at your English that you would be quite capable of doing it in English. So why not do it? What's the difference between Arabic and Arab? Is Arabic only the language? Can you speak Mandarin? Yes, I can speak Mandarin. Arabic is the language. Arab is the sort of ethnic group. At this level, do you find Persian easier than Arabic? Much easier, much easier. Persian is much easier than Arabic. It's easier to read. The writing is more, you know, the relationship between what's written and what's pronounced is much closer than in Arabic. The grammatical structure features that I'm familiar with from other European languages. Persian is an Indo-European language. It's much easier. That's not to say that it's nicer, more fun, or anything else. It's just easier. What is the hardest language you have learned? They are hard in different ways. But I mean, Chinese is hard because of having to learn the characters. Arabic is hard because of the writing system and some of the grammatical features. You know, Japanese has this whole politeness level. So languages are difficult in different ways. I don't really worry about it. I just go ahead and learn. Is it easier to learn Chinese if you know Korean? Easier than, like, depends on what your native language is, but I would say that yes, because a lot of 50% of the vocabulary in Korean is of Chinese origin. The structure of Korean is if anything, I would say the structure of English is closer to the structure of Chinese, but vocabulary in Korean, a lot of the Chinese vocabulary would be recognizable. Okay, and then, hello, sir, how do you determine when you are ready to move on to a different language? When I feel like it. That's all. Like, I'm going to be going to Ukraine second half of May, so the end of this 3-month period, I'm going to try to improve, you know, kind of revive a bit my Russian and Ukrainian. Thereafter, I'm going to work a little bit on Korean. I mean, I'm retired. I do what I want. So whenever I feel like it. How do you divide up a typical study hour in terms of what you do? Listening, reading, podcasts, linking, etc. Do you have a common template? There's no common template. Obviously, I have to put a certain amount of effort into finding content, like Persian Online, for example, or you know, Al Jazeera or France 24 podcasts. I'm investing now into the sort of automatic transcription of these podcasts. So there's a certain amount of preparatory work. But then typically, first thing in the morning, I read. And then I have to decide if I'm going to read old stuff, where there are no blue words, where I'm sort of refreshing and trying to get a better grasp on the language, listen to it. Or if I'm going to forge ahead into new stuff, difficult stuff. And then after the reading that I do in the morning, then that prepares me for my sort of listening activity during the day, whenever I have the opportunity. But once I sit down to do my reading on my iPad, I'll stay there for an hour. But I might jump around. I might review some of my previous conversation reports, and then spend another half hour or so forging ahead in the latest transcribed podcast from Al Jazeera. And then I might do 1 or 2 mini stories. Okay, then I go off and I spend, you know, when I clean up after dinner, whatever, I'm going to be listening or working out in the gym. So there's no plan per se. I know this is tough to answer because you constantly improve, but assuming all languages are equally interesting, which do you think would be the hardest for most people? I have no idea. I think Japanese might be more difficult than Arabic, but I have no real, you know, information to base this on. How do you manage to learn Korean when the words have so many definitions? Yes, Korean in that regard is very difficult. The dictionary, it's the language where I found the dictionaries least helpful. And I had Naver and I had other Korean dictionaries. And it's just a matter of exposing yourself to enough content that after a while, you see certain words in certain contexts and you start to get a sense of what the words mean. And that's why at LingQ, we don't call the meaning that you find in the dictionary a definition. It's only a hint. And in Korean, very often the dictionary definition is even less of a definition. It's just a hint. And you just have to be into enough content that you start to see how these words are used. And I constantly have to remind myself that I have a better sense of Korean now, than I had 6 months ago or 2 years ago. So we always do improve, even if we don't necessarily have a great sense of that improvement. What languages do you plan to learn in the future? Well, right now I'm in my sort of Arabic, Persian, Turkish. So the next one would be Turkish. Thereafter, I might move into the South Asian languages. Time will tell. How many languages, how many known words do you think it will take to be fluent in Korean? Or, excuse me, in Chinese? Remember that the known word total is like an indicator. It's an indicator of your level of activity. So it's not to say that you absolutely need X number of known words to be fluent. But in terms of how much activity, say at LingQ, would be necessary to become fluent, I still think it's a surprisingly high number. It's like 30, 40, 50,000 words. That's what I found in all languages. It doesn't matter, Korean, Czech, Russian. You got to get up to that 50,000 on the way we count words at LingQ. So it's a long road, but hopefully it can be interesting for you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Steve, for answering my question. No problem. Do you tell your tutor what to do? Yes, I do. I tell my tutor what to do, but I also like a tutor who is able to ask me questions, who is a self-starter as well. I don't want to be because it's difficult for me to initiate the conversation. And so the best tutors, you give them an indication of what you'd like to do, what you'd like to talk about, you want a report, you want a recording, and then they engage you with interesting questions. And when you struggle, they supply, some wording in the language and so forth. Any tips if you want to get proficient enough at a language to do some translating work in the future, specifically as a native German talking about translating Japanese? Well, I just think that, listening and reading. I mean, reading words, you need vocabulary, you need structure, you need to see how the language works so that when you become a translator, it's natural to you. So you have to develop sort of good instinct in the language. And I have with my Japanese been in situations where I'm interpreting spontaneously and you just know what it means. When you hear it, you know what it means. Or when you have to translate into that language, you just know instinctively how that is translated. To get to that level requires a lot of exposure to the language. Of course, with reference to grammar as required, when you're curious about structure, you're hesitant, you don't know for sure, you look it up, you forget. But the main thing is that sort of exposure to the language. Now, I want to ask Steve about his favorite Arabic textbook and what is the type of textbook or resources he wishes existed for learning Arabic. Okay, I haven't found a good textbook per se. I enjoy our Arabic mini stories at LingQ. I enjoy going through my conversation reports from my tutor. What I would really wish existed right now. So I have done the mini stories in Arabic, and I can go to Al Jazeera and read a newspaper article and listen to a podcast. What is missing is something in between. And personally, I'm not that interested in the Quran. I'm not interested in religion, period. Asimil has these stories about some of the pre-Islamic, some guy with a sword and a poet and all that stuff. It's too deep. I can't handle that stuff. I'm not that interested. It's not that relevant to me. What would be great to have is textbooks in Arabic with audio on the history of Arabic countries, pre-Islam, post-Islam, geography, current events, slightly simplified, followed with some discussion where the vocabulary is repeated a lot. That would be, to me, phenomenal. That's sort of taking me from my sort of early stages in Arabic to where I can then access genuine, authentic material. Doesn't require a lot of grammatical explanation. The odd grammatical note might be useful. If I take Asimil as an example, there's too much explanation. So you go to the explanation, it doesn't tell you anything that you haven't already noticed in the language. We can over-explain. I think it's much better to have a reference area where you can go and look up certain things, and maybe it should be made easier to get to relevant explanations when you need them, rather than having, as in Asimil, if you start reading all their explanations, you spend your whole time reading the explanation and you're distracted from the content per se. Okay, why have you chosen MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, rather than a dialect? Would you consider learning the Tunisian dialect? I've chosen MSA because it's the standard. I can't learn Tunisian, Moroccan, Levantine, Syrian, Jordan, whatever, Gulf. I learned the standard. And then if I were to go on a trip to Tunisia, of course, I would try to learn the Tunisian dialect. But I'm quite happy with Modern Standard Arabic because there's lots of resources available in it. Why can't I customize Anki? I don't find any Anki, blah, blah, blah. I don't use Anki, so I can't speak. I'm looking for a Greek resource. Yeah, I mean, you can have a look at what we do at LingQ. There are some resources there. I was unable to find a podcast in Greek with transcript. I found a podcast about the building of the Acropolis. I paid to have some of those transcribed. That's expensive. Now that I've discovered this automatic transcription service, and just Google automatic transcription and you'll find it, and that brings the cost down. So it's a matter, like I did, you have to Google to find your Greek podcast, and then you have to try to find this transcription service if you're prepared to spend $20, $30 a month. Will you be able to partner with publishers to get novels and audio for sale through LingQ? We are approaching them. We're trying. Those people are very difficult to deal with. They don't follow up, so we'll see. But we're trying. Okay, 500 Chinese, whatever. Okay, well, can you learn Japanese from scratch through LingQ? I know people have done so. I did that with Russian. I'm sure the only trouble with obviously with Japanese or Chinese is that you have to learn the characters on your own. Yes, learn characters by hand. I think it's helpful. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Mama. Since you are fluent in a lot of languages, I'd like to ask, in your opinion, what are some of the languages you believe will be more important in the future? I think there will be an increasing role for regional languages like Spanish, Russian, Arabic. That's languages that are spoken in a lot of countries, and that might be a counterweight to the importance of English. Thank you for answering my questions. My primary language teacher, and we appreciate your answers. Publishing house Chung & Sui has superb language textbooks for Mandarin, Japanese, Korean. You should check it out. Okay, I'll look it up. Not sure if I can share a teacher's website here, but he is able to provide the kind of diversity to talk about. Okay, I would love to have that. Steve@lingq.com. Send me an email. We'd love to follow up, particularly if we can partner at LingQ. Steve@lingq, LingQ.com. Do you think it's useful to keep re-listening to audio material if you are comprehending it completely and without any difficulty? Well, if there are structures that you still struggle with, and this material has these structures and you're noticing them, I think that's useful. I sometimes do that. Bonjour de la ville de Québec. Pensez-vous que les langues étrangères, mis à part les langues officielles, devraient être enseignées aux plus jeunes à l'école? Should we be teaching foreign languages at an earlier age? This is from Quebec. Yes. In fact, what I would like to see in schools is that kids get exposed to more languages. In Canada, we tend to have this fixation with the official languages. If you're in French, if you're at a French language school, you learn English. If you're in English language school, you learn French. I think we should expose young people to a variety of languages, not necessarily with the intention of getting them to speak, but getting them exposed and developing some degree of comprehension. And I think this will make their brains more flexible. And at a later stage, if they become very motivated, they'll have an easier time learning languages. So expose young people to more languages. And the argument at schools always is, we don't have a qualified teacher. Well, there's so many resources available on the internet that needn't matter. How many words to be able to converse wide and read language? As I said, 30, 40, 50,000 words. It's a high number. Blah, blah, blah. I'm also learning French as a function. What resource do you have on LingQ to help you expose your French from a Canadian perspective? At LingQ, you can choose a filter in our library, and you can, look for content that's in Québécois or in the accent from Quebec. I don't think we have a lot of such material. If there's interest, we can try to find more. If there are some Québécois that want to help us create some content, talk to your friends, transcribe that and put it in our library, that would create more material, because I know there is a demand for people who are going to be working in Quebec or living in Quebec for such material. Do you sometimes have problems with confusing languages? Oh, sure, always. Yeah, I mean, speaking foreign languages is a matter of confusion, is a matter of being less, making mistakes, being less fluent than you are in your own language. It comes with the territory. And at that, I'm going to cut it off. Thank you very much. Bye for now.